tall, gangly thing?
Hello and welcome to High Rol Radio episode number 5. My name is Nick DePasquale. You may know me as Gangly. And today, it's the European Takeover. I'm joined by two very special guests. It's Gunmay and Impetuous Panda. I was going to give the classic Gunmay introduction of the 6'4" gaming machine from Sweden, but I realized I hadn't prepared something for Panda. So
that's unfair.
You can say the same thing. We're actually the same.
Oh wow!
Height
Are you also
he actually is the better Gunmay, dude. This is unfair.
Gunmay
just copy pasted.
Are you also a size 15 shoe or whatever it is that Gunmay is?
Not quite. Size 12. So I'm not that out there.
I got one.
Yeah, Gunmay's feet are bigger than my head. It's actually nuts.
Oh shit!
All right. Well, Gunmay, Panda, thank you both for being here. Let's just give a couple quick introductions. You can talk about yourselves a little bit. Let me know how you're doing. Gunmay, why don't you start?
Well, the two-time retired Swedish-Spanish player from Europe. Used to play a lot in set 2, 3, and 4. Then I kind of vanished off the face of the earth while still complaining in lobby 2 every day about the game. And now I'm back. Here we are.
Very nice. Panda, how you doing?
Doing great. I'm an esports caster, joined TFT for set 6, and I'm more, on board with the whole EMEA team, broadcast team for all the events, and obviously playing a lot. I played in set 1 on and off, set 3 the most, but not really the same level as set 6. And super excited with everything that's happened the last few months and what's coming forward, and happy to be here.
Very nice. Yeah, so let me just take a minute right now and explain how this show works. So this is a live TFT call-in show, which means you, the viewer, if you're watching right now live on Twitch, you can actually have an active part in what we do tonight. So if you look in Twitch chat, I'm spamming the Discord link. If you go in there, that's how you get into my Discord server. You go into Discord. On the left-hand side, you'll see a High Rol Radio tab. Within that, you'll see a Submit Takes topic. Go in there. Let us know your questions, your opinions, your hot takes, whatever you got. We want to talk about it. So make sure you get your takes in there. Throughout the show, I'm going to be pulling callers to speak with us live on air, where you can actually engage with us during the show. We normally do have a producer for the show. Unfortunately, we don't today. So things are going to be a little bit slower. We're going to be kind of figuring it out while we go. Either way, though, we still want to hear what you guys have to say. Very much looking forward to hearing your takes. A couple things that we want to talk about today. We can talk about the Set 6 European performance. I actually feel like a loose way to describe it.
Performance, that's a good one.
We can talk about Set 6. We can talk about the state of EU. We can talk about PBE. We can talk about the PBE clash going on right now, the worldwide PBE event. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. So we're pretty open to hearing whatever you guys want to talk about. Just let us know. Put those takes in the Discord. And in the meantime, let's just talk. I actually think talking about EU in Set 6 is a good starting point. We're obviously putting the cherry on top, so we can kind of recap how things went. I want to hear from Gunmay first, actually, though. I mean, you competed in some of the open qualifiers for EU. Can you kind of maybe talk about before we even talk about how EU did at Worlds, can you talk about your experience competing this year or the set?
Well, I only really played the 6.5 one, like the last one. There's 3 golden spatula cups, and I played in the absolute last one. At that point, I was like coming back to the game, so I didn't really have any expectations. I think there's a lot more new names to the scene, which is interesting, as naturally I've been gone for like 2 sets almost now. So of course there's going to be a lot of new names, but there's still a lot of the same old names that I played against in set 2, 3, and 4, like usual. Like the usual people like Voltarius, Dasic, Salvi, even though he's been like kind of going away as well. But yeah, like the same people are still playing, and then just more new faces.
Was it hard taking the gap, like taking a break and coming back?
Yes and no. Like I had a pretty big gap in playing. Like I've been playing like for fun, but like I get challenger and then like I'll just DK back down if I don't feel like playing. But like I think tournament-wise and everything, I'm extremely rusty, and like I've never been much of a ladder player anyways. I had fun for like the week or whatever I played snapshots, try harding a bit, but I think in a game like TFT, even though things change, like as long as the fundamentals are the same, you never really lose the ability to like climb ladder. Like if you have a player that has been like always challenger since the beginning, like even if they're gone for a year, they're always gonna come back to challenger unless like the game fundamentally like changes a ton, which I don't think the game can. And especially since there's no mechanical requirement either. Like it's not like League of Legends or CS where like if you don't play every day and you like fall off or whatever, it's very little of that. So,
Panda, did you follow? Were you casting in set 5 as well, or was set 6 kind of your introduction to casting for TFT?
Set 6 was my introduction. I played. I mean, set 3 I was involved to some extent, where I was playing much more than set 1 and 2. I was much more interested in the game from a competitive standpoint, not as a player, but just as a casual thing on the side where I could compete and still have fun. Again, I got to like challenger, but I don't think it was worth much because I don't remember being good at all at the game. And when I came back to set 6 and I tried to get challenger, I'm like, damn, this is difficult. But I remember Gunmay's name. I remember all the kind of OGs that Gunmay mentioned, Dazig, Volterix. I remember them all matter. I think there wasn't much of a esports scene yet. It was kind of very scrambled all over the place and very kind of amateur still for TFT. But I do remember a lot of the latter names. So coming back in set 6, like Gunmay said, a lot of new names, but I remember all these kind of names that I was playing with in lobbies in set 3 to some extent, still being at the top and still dominating.
What was your impression of the competitive scene for set 6, or of the format, I guess is a better way to ask?
I think it was very good. I'm going to be biased. The company that's running kind of all of the MEA scene for Riot is GGTech, and I work with them on Legends of Runeterra, Riot's card game for the past 2 years. They're a Spanish company, so I mean double bias there. And I think they're very, very competent at what they do. I think they have a very good team. So I was very lucky that I didn't really experience TFT competitive in set 4 and 5 because I've heard stories and it didn't seem very cohesive or very rewarding for players or for viewers or for anyone. So my very biased take is that I'm really happy with what happened with set 6. I think players as well. Really, it was like a step up from like a professional standpoint, and how much more organized everything was and how much more competent everything seemed. So no idea about set 5, but set 6 I think was very good. And set 7 hopefully will be better as well.
Yeah, I agree. Like for sure, like set 6, the jump in not only tournament or like player quality, like quality of life changes, but like production value, everything for EU, I think did a huge step up because it kind of was lacking, to say the least, in all the previous sets. And so like it's finally moving in the right direction for sure.
One of the prize pools was like little eggs.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Set 3, baby. 10 eggs provided by Kit Kat. You already know.
So I think that's already, a big improvement.
Yeah,
so I've been a big proponent of open brackets basically since the dawn of TFT, of competitive TFT. I've been pushing for open brackets for a very long time. And I know that at least in NA, the large majority of the player base, especially the high elo player base, is very much against open brackets. I know in set 4, we had like the last chance qualifier. We actually ended up having like an open bracket regionals run. I forget who the player was. Was it Waterbear? Something like that. A player who came from the open bracket and made like a crazy regionals run. People kind of had some opinions on that. But EU ran open brackets throughout set 6 and 6.5. I'm curious to the both of you, like what your impression of having like open brackets play a pretty significant part in the competitive format felt like.
I think it's really important. Like I think the NA players, like no flame in that sense. It's just that a lot of the NA players, especially high elo, are very centric around the streaming scene and everything. So their source of income or like their interest lies more in the streaming and being the only people in the top and so on. So like I think their priorities is just different there. Also like they value smaller tournaments less because of it. While in EU, I think the streaming scene is very small unless you're French. There's some names also that, like for example, there's some big Spanish streamer and German streamers, and like here and there, like there's some English ones. But in general, I think there's a lot more like the EU players are more like actual players first rather than streamers, and I think that's also why like a lot of EU people like appreciate tournaments more. But I also think the open tournament qualifiers is really important because it kind of gives this, I don't want to say illusion because that sounds negative, but it gives the hope of like you can do this dream run of being a Masters player and going the whole way to the final and high rolling your way. Like people like for example, I'm really against the whole, oh, I want to reduce the RNG as much as possible to like give the advantage to the better player. But like the reality of it is, for the ecosystem to work and for like people to be interested in the game, is the illusion of like, oh, I could do this. Like look at this guy. Why can't I do this? You know, it's the same in League and other esports. It's just way harder, right? But in TFT, it's like similar to like other games of chance, like poker or whatever, where you can potentially high roll. Like you can have this one in a moment chance and like high roll your whole way to the finals, so maybe even win. You know, and that gives a lot of interest to the scene as well, I think.
I think that Gunmay mentioned the interest of the player. I think that's the biggest thing. I've been involved with many different esports scenes, and a lot of players really have a very narrow-minded approach in terms of what an esports scene is and what it kind of has to have, because it's what they want to have, or what, you know, they think on their kind of interests. And this is not a selfish thing. I mean, I think it's normal to think about your interests, at least subconsciously. But it's very important, especially from my perspective as a caster and kind of being involved behind the scenes. I know what's necessary for an esports team to thrive, and I do think like inclusion matters a lot. Players like Gunmay mentioned that play through open qualifiers, they might not have a chance at actually making it or winning, but even them being interested and incentivized to play and to try and compete widens the scene a lot at the lower level. I think is important. The only like one thing I would say I wasn't super much a fan of was that the fact that it was Diamond 2 and above.
Yeah.
The threshold for open qualifiers, I think that's pointless. I think someone that doesn't have the time to get to Masters even is not really in any serious position to compete, even if they're a prodigy of TFT.
Yeah.
And obviously, the more you narrow down the amount of players that can qualify, the better chance the ones that actually are good and investing time are going to make it into the open qualifiers. It was like a slot problem with not everyone making, even if they wanted to. And also just the smaller the pool of players, the better generally to you know, if you can't play a billion games, then having it so that there's you know, a smaller pool is usually better.
Yeah, exactly.
So
you gotta find.
I like it, but I think it has to be.
Did they have tiered signups by or tiered registration by rank?
Yeah,
no, I could see that being.
They?
I could see
Did they?
Because obviously the further down in rank you go, the larger the population of that rank is. There's more Diamond 2 players than there are Masters players, and there are more Masters players than there are GM and Challenger. The problem is, if all the Diamond 2 players are signing up right away, and your GM and Challenger players can't sign up, that's an issue.
Yeah, I think Challengers got priority, or like, I mean, or something.
Challengers, the 61st Challengers didn't go to qualifiers.
No, they went
directly
and Golden Spatula, yeah. But like the other ones as well, didn't they get priority?
Maybe. Again, I'm
not actually sure. I only did one, and then like I just went straight to the Golden Spatula Cup. But like, I think they had some sort of priority on Challengers, like they could sign up the day after or something and still have their spots guaranteed, and then it will go waitlist after that. But I think anything GM and under, they didn't have any sort of priority. I think. I'm not 100% sure on that, but
the thing I always come back to with open brackets is, to me, TFT requires a lot of time to climb, like any game, really. A lot of these games that are 30, 40-minute games, it just requires a lot of time in order to grind. And to me, I think that tournaments are kind of a way to expedite that like growing phase, where if a player can commit to 1 weekend of just playing 6 games a day or whatever, a Masters player who is Masters because he just doesn't have the time, he or she doesn't have the time to dedicate to the game, they actually have suddenly the chance to play against these really high level players. And it's a way for them to build a clear roadmap for improvement. It's like, it's a way to motivate players to say, hey, actually, you know, maybe I'm not that bad at this. Maybe there actually is a chance that if I could dedicate the time to this game, I could be one of the best of the best. And to me, inspiring players who are kind of on the cusp of being at the high level is really important, because you can't incentivize them with money. To me, it's like you're not going to give Masters players money, like earnings. You're not going to get anything for placing 129th in a tournament. So why not give them the opportunity to play with these players that they normally don't have the time to grind against on ladder? Like, I think that having some sort of clear, easy entryway into the competitive scene is really important.
I agree. Also, like, I had like an experience with this Golden Spatula Cup that I played in 6.5. Is where someone actually like messaged me. Like, he went 8th. Like, he just got farmed, but he messaged me after and said it was really cool playing with you. And like, there's like one more Challenger player that he had like followed for a while. It's like, oh, it's just really cool to play like in these lobbies for a bit. And then like that was all he wanted. He was like, "Oh, this is just really cool. I made this through the open qualifier, and I wanted to play against this." Like,
bro. I mean, like I think about when I got to play in Fight Night with you. Like, do you remember that Fight Night?
I do. I gave you Berserkers.
Yeah,
I let you have it.
Yeah, I don't know, Panda. I don't know if you know this story. I actually told this on like episode 1 of High Rol Radio, so I'll keep this one brief. But basically, like when I was first coming up in set 2, I learned how to play by basically I was trying to find LOL chess profiles that I thought looked really cool, and I found a guy on North America called Mino Zerks. And actually, Gunmay, I don't know if you know this part of the story. I messaged Gunmay on NA. I friended him, and Gunmay just sent me a question mark. He accepted the friend request, sent me a question mark, and I was like, "Hey man, I'm trying to learn how to play Berserkers. Do you mind kind of breaking down how you get to your end game?" And he just immediately unfriended me.
Wait, are you serious? Wait, no way.
Immediately unfriended me.
Oh shit, I'm toxic.
And then a week later, he released his Berserker guide, and I was like, "Oh, so that's how he does it."
Oh no,
that's why he was trying not to spoil it. He was trying to keep you interested in his content. That's the reason why.
Maybe I thought I played you on ladder, and I thought you were like maybe I took an 8th or something just before, and I thought you added me to like flame my ass, and I was like, yeah, I'm not listening to this shit. I actually didn't know that at all, dude. That feels bad.
But anyway, I ended up learning how to play Berserkers. I got to play against Gunmay who in Fight Night, and he was like, "Gangly, you can play Berserkers." Like, I won't play him. And I got to play, basically I was just one-tricking Berserkers against Gunmay, Fluffy, Soulless, Natures, I think was in that lobby.
Narcus, I think.
Yeah,
I remember.
It was a
crazy
stacked lobby. And I ended up high rolling on the day. Like I high rolled, I top 3'd.
You got 3rd, I think.
Yeah. I tied with Natures for 2nd, and I lost the tiebreaker, so I got 3rd. And to me, it was like I knew coming out of that event that I was significantly worse than the other players in the lobby. But just the nature of TFT is that if you have, like, to me, I had the advantage of being a one trick and being given the one comp that I play every single game. And so you can kind of build these little advantages for yourself to, even though you may be a worse player, there's still a chance that you place pretty well. And to me, that was like what really ignited that flame for competitive TFT. So all that to say, I really do think it's important for open brackets and for amateur events and for clear roadmaps to be built out for players who are on the come up and just want to be motivated to play this game.
Yeah, for sure.
But I do think, as I mentioned before, I think the most important thing to highlight is it should be open, but there should be a certain requirement minimum, because if not, like imagine someone's grandmaster, late in the season, like 700, 800 LP, and they do this. I think if you're not challenger, you don't have the priority spot, and they do just. I think for the 3rd Golden Pacific Cup, it was like a randomized system, right, where you just sign up and then you have a chance at making it, but if there's over X amount of people.
Yeah, that's not good.
So imagine someone that's Grandmaster 800 LP doesn't make it in, and someone that's Diamond 2 does. And obviously
that sounds horrible.
Like it wouldn't be great. So we had like a feedback thing with Ryan, and I kind of mentioned they should have some way to give kind of a tiered access to not just Challenger, but going down the line, like some kind of priority to Grandmaster Plus as well, while still keeping it open. But I think if you raise the floor a bit to Masters, which is not really a time issue. If you can reach Masters and you're trying to compete in TFT at a high level, I don't think it's a time issue. After 3 or 4 weeks, you should be there.
Yeah.
So I do think that still keeps it open, but solves some issues that I think there would be if it's just open to Diamond 2, which is just too many players, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. I could see a world where maybe Masters Up just makes more sense for open brackets. I mean, there's still a lot of Masters players, especially now. Like back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, you can't DK anymore, so you can't fall out, right? So
no, I remember even like in set 2. I remember when I first hit Masters, I was like top 1,000 by being Masters 10 LP or something.
But because the game was almost dead, right?
Yeah,
so we didn't have any play.
Nowadays, it's like I don't know the number, but there are a lot.
Yeah, no. If I look at the Masters list in the client, my client lags. Like it literally lags because there's so many people in Masters.
Yeah, there are a lot of Masters players. So you could definitely fill up an open qualifier with hundreds of spots of just Masters player. I have no doubt, especially in EU where the player base is so big.
Yeah.
That kind of leads me to the next thing we could talk about for a bit. And I know we actually do have a take that I want to bring on a little bit later, but I do want to kind of introduce the idea of regional leagues in Europe. One of the things that really makes the European scene very different than from NA is that on top of this overarching competitive format, you also have these sub-regions, or you have like these regional leagues. I know I know like the Italian scene has Super League. I don't know what France and Poland looks like, but I know you were both kind of talking about that. But like, well, first let me ask you this way, Gunmay, are you actually involved? Is there a Swedish scene that you play in, or Swedish or Spanish? I guess you do a bit more Spanish stuff nowadays, right?
Yeah, like the Spanish scene is really growing. Like the Spanish, like has always had like a bigger scene in general, but it hasn't like done stuff like France has, for example. Like France, what they've done is like they've managed to like they have a lot of big streamers and like big contacts from other games and stuff. So they managed to like find interest in like a third party like involvement for like tournaments and stuff, and like but they prioritize mainly French, and maybe they invite like some people like Salvi or Daisy or whoever is like the highest at the time, but in general it's prioritizing like the French scene. And so what they've done is like they basically like made this little ecosystem for themselves where they're continuously getting better and better and getting more experience and getting like more practice in, essentially. And I think it shows as well, like obviously at like the regionals where like most of it's French people. I think Poland has been doing stuff with like the Ultra Liga. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but I think it's called something like that. And then Spain is now like doing stuff like we're lucky to have like people like Manute and Aka Wonder and Snoody who are like trying to run stuff and like do more tournaments and stuff. Like for example, now they're doing like the national team, if you've seen that, where they're basically taking like they're doing like basically whoever is like some of the top players from Spain right now. They took like how should you say, like the good and trustworthy like old guard, so to say.
Okay, so it's not by LP,
for this first one.
Reputation a bit more.
Yeah, for this first one, it's like a mix, but like it's to like do it for the first time, right? And they're going to France, like they're literally traveling to France to do like boot camps and stuff.
No
and like,
way.
I'm sure they have stuff done like this. They probably have stuff prepared with the French players, and like the plan is like to do more of these for like any bigger events. Like I think Manute told me it was like at least one. They want to do one for each Golden Spatula Cup. They want to do like a boot camp like this. They want to like do more tournaments. Like we're already seeing on PB, like for example, this weekend there's like one PB tournament that's like it's like a lot of the Spanish players, but then there's also a mix of invited players as well from EU, like a pretty big one together with Aces. Aces Rogue. Yeah.
You're playing in that as well?
Yeah, I'm playing it. Yeah, it was confirmed today.
Okay. Is there like a tryout process? Like I imagine, Gunmay, you want to be on the national team.
I'm going to be on that. Like I'm kind of be cocky enough to say that. Like at the end of this, like if I'm not in the top of Spain, like I failed. Like and that's no flame to the Spanish community at all, because of like they're like brothers, like they're so welcoming and nice. But my goal is obviously like top Europe. So like we do top Spain.
And this is the kind of thing exactly like this example I think with Gunmay, with you kind of being very incentivized to want to grind for a spot on that, for example. If that team didn't exist, maybe you wouldn't take Set 7 as seriously.
Exactly, yeah.
You wouldn't care as much.
That makes a huge difference, because like before like a big part of why I quit was because there's like nothing to play for. Like why should I waste more time? Like for me,
and that same example can be seen in all kind of like the whole idea about like the regions that are doing best in Europe is not because you're born in France and all of a sudden
exactly,
talent.
You're not
it's
like
because the ecosystem is that much better at supporting players and incentivized playing. And it's the same with like Poland. Now they have the Uniliga, which is like a regional competition, and they had ladder snapshots to qualify to the top stage or the final stage, whatever, before Golden Spatula Cup. So all of a sudden, all these Polish players are in top form because they had something to grind for apart from just the normal stuff. And we had Sproyson coming in this set and qualifying to Worlds even and doing great in all the Golden Spatula Cups, because I think in great part he had a reason to be playing a lot on ladder and playing tournaments and being in really good form. And it's the same with all the countries that are doing well in Europe. It's for that reason. They have kind of an ecosystem where either there's streamers and influencers that Riot wants to support because they know it's good for the scene in general and for the game in kind of their own regional offices in France and in Spain, or they have third-party companies, tournament organizers, esport orgs that want to invest for the same reason, because there's and now in Spain the same thing's happening. There's streamers that are getting very good numbers that are doing a lot of initiative as well, is the most important thing with Manute and Snoody as well, and that's something that Europe needs. But it's also, I think, a bad thing because, like Gunmay was saying, France is very good, but they're very enclosed because of how their ecosystem works and because of how languages work in Europe, where it's so separate. It's so which is bad for Europe. I think a lot of set 6, a lot of what happened in Europe, and a lot of why Europe isn't better, considering the player base you have. If you look at all of Europe, is because it's very sectioned into different countries and different communities, and that kind of ends up hindering Europe a little bit as well. But that's the biggest thing. The biggest thing is if each regional country kind of has their own thing going for them, it's going to make the floor, the skill floor, and the top players go much, much higher in set 7.
Yeah, I want to respond, or I'll let Gunmay respond. I do want to actually just say, just because I know we have a couple new people in the chat right now, that if you are in chat and you have a take about this, I know we are going to bring someone else on to talk about regions in EU in a little bit, but make sure that you're using the Discord server to put your take in and wait in the waiting room, because I know I've seen some people talking in chat. Jake, I see you there talking about some stuff with NA as well, and even the regional issues NA has. We'd love to talk about all that. We don't have too many takes coming in yet, and we're going to bring them on probably in the next 10 or 15 minutes, but if you guys do have a take, make sure you're using the Discord command, hopping in there, putting your take in the submit topics, and then waiting in the waiting room until we can bring you on the show. Sorry, Gunmay, you can go for it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I was gonna point on the thing that they said that it's also a bad thing, because in the past it used to be very open. Who like we even mixed NA and EU a lot. Like when I was playing the most in set 3, like I was playing on EU and NA ladder constantly, and like someone was like a lot of other people as well, and like we'd talk, we'd like share strategies, we do all this stuff, right? Now it's been like very much more, even since the world started, it's more EU versus NA, and now even in EU it's like France versus Spain versus Italy versus Germany. Like there's a lot more regional pride, which like it's a good thing because it makes like a storyline, I guess, in a way. But it's
big picture,
it's worse. Yeah, for the region as a whole, it makes it worse, because like you'll end up like with players that, how should I say, like it's like, yeah, you end up in like these cliques of like your country,
right. Yeah.
And it kind of limits like
and cliques of play style, cliques of knowledge. I mean, overall, the NA is so good at a very top level, looking at like top 20, 30, 40 players, because it's a clique that you're getting very, very high quality knowledge in terms of streamers that are sharing knowledge constantly on stream and showing other players. And that knowledge in those top 40 is constantly growing together because it's very good inputs and you know, it's making everything very competitive. Whereas in EU, you have different countries. At the top of those countries, 5 or 10 very good players that are only growing between themselves. They're not really sharing and you know, game theory and just overall perspectives on the game at a high level with other countries. So it creates these, like, France is very good because, you know, for reasons that we already discussed, obviously. But other countries have like 4 or 5 very good players that if all of these players were in a Discord server and had good relationships and were constantly sharing knowledge and trying to improve as a core, I think EU, you know, there's no question about it, would be much better than NA, simply from a number perspective, because there's just a lot more population. But NA is better in set 6, and I think it's the big reason because of this, because you're constantly improving with very high quality inputs.
I think it's made NA a lot top heavier as well. It's always been a little bit like that on ladder. It's always been like the top 25 is really good in NA, whereas like the whole ladder in EU is really good, if that makes sense. Like it's been like, because like instead of like sharing like maybe the top 3 French players, instead of sharing their stuff with the top 3 Italian players, they share it with number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10, like 9, 10 of the French players. Instead, it lifts up like the bottoms. Like I think the ladder as a whole in EU is a lot harder because of this. But it also makes that they top out, like they cap out, so to say, like harder on ladder as well. Like I feel like the top players are always going to be similar in level. Like I don't think there's much difference from the rank 1 in NA, EU, China, Korea, wherever. But I think as a, like he was saying, like you have this group of like very top heavy players where they're like practicing together. I feel like that doesn't really happen much in EU anymore.
Yeah, you know, I think one of the things that it reminds me of in a way is, so obviously I come back to this every episode, but I come from Smash before TFT. I primarily competed in Melee, and you know, a big part of Melee history was crew battles. It was the regional pride of East Coast versus West Coast versus Midwest versus South. And, you know, in TFT, NA doesn't really have that. But in Smash, it was actually something very similar, where the best players tended to be number 1 from East Coast, number 1 from West Coast, number 1 from the Midwest, number 1 from the South. A little bit. It was a little more East Coast, West Coast heavy. But you're right that eventually, just fast forward to modern day Melee, where we have net play, people are playing online, everybody's trading knowledge, and you're not really segmented by by your region anymore. What I will say though is that this is something that actually blows my mind with EU, and it's actually kind of frustrating to me that people aren't making content about the storylines of Europe, because the good part about having the regions, like the strict cutoff of the French players, we don't tell our secrets to the Spanish players, and they don't tell their secrets to the Italian players, is that you have all these real rivalries and these real storylines that could be told in a variety of different mediums. And I said this in the last episode, like, maybe I'm just not seeing it, and maybe there are content creators in Europe that are doing.
There isn't.
I just don't get it. Like, even someone who could just sit in front of the camera and just tell a cool story about what's going on in Europe. Oh, thank you, Ramblin', for the raid. Appreciate that. Hope you had a good stream.
So I can explain to you again.
Yeah. Break
this
it
is
down
exactly
for me.
my dilemma. Coming from other esports, the number one thing that I'm interested in, aside from casting, is usually I don't stream, I don't do YouTube, I don't do anything else like that. But a lot of my time I invest in doing player content, trying to, again, I really care about narratives and storylines in events. And I think it's pointless to have a player that's very good at TFT or Runeterra, whatever card game it is, or whatever strategy game it is, if you can't have the viewer engage with that player in something other than just he's a number on the screen that's very good at this game. Because then there's no long-term engagement, there's no growing of the scene, it's like traditional sports. There's all these different narratives and storylines. The NBA, for example, is an example. Going to set 6, one of the problems with the EU is that because everyone's doing content in their own language, there's very little overlap between communities, between players.
Exactly.
No one is doing English-speaking content in Europe other than maybe Dasic as a streamer. Alex M, a few, but most of the big streamers are all streaming in their native language.
Yeah.
Solo Gazang in German, the French scene, which causes a very big disconnect because you can't really, there isn't just natural content about EU generally. And I wanted to tackle this in set 6 with the official EMEA broadcast team. That's something that we're going to do in set 7. I can't make any promises or any leaks yet, but this was something that I was trying to push the moment I joined the team for set 6, and something that I think the whole broadcast team is also aware of. Something that we didn't really have the right support for in set 6 yet, but in set 7, I think we will. And there was a lot of player content in terms of player interviews, but there was nowhere to host it. It was all shown in the breaks, in the Golden Patsa Cups, and all these, every single tournament had a lot of player interview and a lot of player content in between the breaks, but it wasn't posted on Twitter, wasn't posted on YouTube, so it was kind of lost in the void. And hopefully in set 7, we're going to do a few different things to amend this, and I'm going to try and do stuff with my own initiative. This is something I've done every other esport I've worked in. I've done this kind of stuff, and I do think, as you mentioned, it's sorely missing, but it has a lot of issues. I think mostly the language stuff in EU, it being so separated is obviously a problem for content.
Yeah, I think also just in terms of like branching out as well, and in general, like a lot of people don't try in English or anything like that, not because they don't speak it. Like some might not be comfortable doing it, right? Like I know personally, like a lot of people in Spain or France, they don't speak English as a second language very naturally, right? Like so it's not as easy as for someone like in NA, obviously, which English is primarily spoken, like it's all English, right?
Speaks English.
So and I think that's also ended up happening in the streaming scene as well, where like it's primarily English watched streamers. Like there are like Spanish and French and even I'm sure Italian or German, but it's very little compared to like for example like a Soyu, obviously. Like it's like he dwarfs everyone, right?
Well,
and like
because they can't benefit from it. I mean, we talked about I talk about on Triforce Tactics as well with Spicy Appies and the rest of them. It's just because any EU player can tune into North American streamers and watch them, and I enjoy them a lot. I think it's really, really good for the North American team to have so many great streamers. But the same can't be said about kind of the other way around. You can to some extent. I know. I think it was Socks tunes into Sean's and I also watch Sean. I don't know French, but I can watch Sean to understand what he's doing and see obviously TFT and what he's playing and still watch it and for it to be entertaining. But there's a lot of loss of viewers because of this. And what Gunmay said I think is normal. I'm not expecting these players to suddenly start making content in English because it's not even good, because they have already a base that is in this language, and they're not going to change that obviously, even if they could. But you do need outside people that have initiative to either Riot, third-party companies, people like maybe myself doing stuff like similar to what Gangly does in NA, where you're able to get these players out of their comfort spot and say, hey, let's do this in English, let's do this content in English, let's have you maybe make a relationship with this other top player from another country, let's have like regional events. Like we had a show match between France and Spain at the end of set 6, for example. Stuff like that. I think a lot of that has to happen in EU, and I think it's something that's missing and will probably arrive in set 7.
Also, like if we're gonna have like this regional disparity, can we at least talk some shit? Like I'm so bored of like every interview being like, no, yeah, I just high rolled, I did really good, like I played like I should have, like I just did the math, like no, fuck that, like please, like talk some shit. Like I wanna, like if France wins, like if I was French and I qualified with 4 other French players from EU, I would talk so much shit. Holy God. Like I would say every other country in EU is trash. Like I literally, like every time, like people shit on me like on this for before as well, but like I would always say before a tournament already, like you know how Soyu does as well, like he says, this is about to be free. This is like this is gonna be the easiest money of my life. Like we need more of that. Like everyone's so scared of like being wrong or being like cocky and then going eighth, you know? Yeah, exactly. Like I don't give a fuck. Like I literally, like this tournament we're playing this weekend, I literally just put a tweet and I said, yeah, I hope you guys have fun winning while I was gone. Now I'm back, so yeah, I'm gonna win.
Let's go.
So it's like like small shit like that. Like people don't, like, even in interviews, like they're so scared. Like they just answer the question and then leave. Like we talked about this in the talk a bit.
I think it's not scared. I think it's more just that's the nature, the personalities a lot of players have, unfortunately. From my perspective, as someone that tries to do content, we were talking about it with the interviews and stuff. You're trying to get more from players, but if they're just reserved or maybe not, it's hard to find someone that has like a very open and kind of very explosive personality that's also very good at TFT. That's not or at strategy games in general.
Maybe it's just the genre. Like it just invites people that are calm, collected, and logical. Maybe. I don't know.
To some extent,
but I want some more rivalry for sure.
Kind of circling back to the whole idea of content needing to be made in EU, I want to challenge someone, whoever's watching this that thinks they actually have the capacity to do this. I think the EU needs to start with kind of baseline content. Let me tell you, this is the exact piece of content that needs to come out before the Set 7 competitive season starts. I'm a North American fan. I want to know 5 players who I should be watching in Europe going into this next set. And let me just tell you, that's actually, I'm making a video like that for North America. I'm going to be putting out a video about 5 different players to watch and kind of outlining their storylines of their competitive, career thus far. I want 5 players in Europe that I should care about and tell me why. And make it short. Give me 30 seconds on each player. Tell me why they're good, why they might be on the come up. Are they coming back? Are they Gunmay taking a break and now claiming they're going to
it's
take
just
over?
Me 5 times, dude. Let's go, dude.
No, but I am serious.
Who, Dasic, who, fucking Salvi, who? No, it's just Gunmay 5 times, bro. Easy.
It's Gunmay on EUNE. It's Gunmay on EU West. It's Mino Zerks on
Swedish,
NA.
Yeah, it's Swedish Gunmay. It's Spanish Gunmay. It's American Gunmay. Fuck it, just throw them all in there. We have upgraded Gunmay, Panda.
That's right, Panda.
We have everyone.
But there's very simple, basic content deck, and it doesn't need to be the prettiest thing, like sit and write a script, read it out loud. I don't care if you're staring at the script the whole time. Put some B-roll on top of it to cover it up. Find a super an editor that's like in college and just wants to get some experience and will do stuff for free. Like there are people out there that would be willing to make this content happen because people love TFT, and like if people just do some digging, like I promise you, the rest will come. I want to actually go for it.
I was just gonna say that there has been a little bit from like the French scene and stuff I've seen. Like before Worlds, I did like some interviews with like I believe it was Sean's and I'm So Fresh and stuff like this. Like he's not French, right? But he speaks French.
But it was in French.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Yeah, exactly. That's where the disparity is. Like I think there is content coming, but it's getting it to the English audience. That's like the hard part, I think, right now. Like it's just.
It'll happen for Set 7.
I think so too. I
almost guarantee it. I can't say how and in which way because I can't yet. But I mean, working with Riot and working with the team, with the EMEA broadcast team behind the scenes, this is definitely a priority going to Set 7. And it was already for Set 6, but we just didn't have. It was just too early on in the whole project to really tackle that. They wanted to tackle first the base and the foundation of it. And I think they did a very good job. But Set 7 will be kind of all the details that are missing that Wisdom, for example, Gangly, and just NA has kind of developed naturally because it's a much more, like Gunmay mentioned, a streamer kind of environment with top players that are also very entertaining and know how to do content by themselves. I mean, you see all these TFT clips and everything on YouTube because it's just the content just, by itself, it just, in call with Raditz and Soju and etc. It just happens. But in EU, it's not going to come naturally. You have to kind of have someone that has initiative and hopefully the broadcast team and Riot and other, I think, players or other content creators as well will be able to step up for that 7.
All right, you guys want some calls?
Yeah, sure.
Let's do it. All right, I'm going to bring in our first caller. Pikachu. Pikachu's here. You're muted right now. If you want to just unmute your mic, let me know where you're calling from and what do you want to talk about?
I'm calling from France, and my take is kind of a hot take. And that's something that I've seen discussed in Reddit, and an idea that I've seen grow a bit more on some Discord, I would say, is that France... you're telling me for the first hot take, right?
Yes, the first one.
Go for it.
Go for it.
Yeah.
So the idea was that France, as a region, should be a sub-region, just like Korea happens to be in League, and that it should have separate world spot from the rest of the EU, which would also allow the other region of Europe to grow more, because I don't think you can grow when you're playing for like second place. So I think that allowing Europe to have more tough competitions and more exposure worldwide, while keeping the spots for French player, which every single world, well, I did post like the numbers, but like except for one, French sent more than half EU players, like the EU players at Worlds every time. So I think that there's like something that is wrong with the distribution, and maybe something that we can look into.
I can go ahead and answer what I think. I think that's exactly what EU should not do. If you're looking to improve EU as a whole, and if you care about EU as a region, and it's the complete opposite of what you should do. Cornering out France into one region. Sure, France can continue doing well, but they're not going to be better than NA or China just by themselves. And it's something that I'm not going to pretend I know what will happen depending on what we do, but just from the numbers and from like if you follow sports and just understand how these systems work, if you have a smaller group. We talked about it 20 minutes ago, I think, at the start of the show, with the top players constantly improving. France will be very good, yes. The French players will be the best in Europe, yes, if you count as a region. But EU as a whole and France as a whole will not improve at the level they could improve at if there was more of a tailored approach to getting the top players from every single country and not looking at national pride, but more looking at regional pride. So if you care about Europe as a whole, going into Worlds, for example, that's the big picture you're looking at with TFT, I think it's the opposite of what you should do. If you care about only France, definitely that's a great idea for French players and French community, because they're going to grow more and they're going to have a spot for themselves, and that's great. But I think it's a selfish thing to do if you care about EU at all.
I actually disagree that it's even good for France. I think it will, they might have like more singled out exposure and but they would just be doing the same thing they're doing right now, but they would limit their spots, if anything, and get less spots. So if you're really considering France as that much of a powerhouse to where they just shit on all of EU, which to be fair, they have been this set has obviously been a bit of a extra, it's not been this bad in the previous sets, but if you really consider France that much high roll, that much higher in level of all of EU, then wouldn't you want to be in EU and just claim all the spots? If you're just looking at France, as a French fan, why wouldn't you just want the 6 spots or the 5 spots? Because if you're limited to 1 or 2 spots, if you're your own region, then you're just shooting yourself in the foot and the scene in the foot as well.
That's fair. But to come back on one thing you said, this set was not much of an exception. The only exception was in set 5, where France didn't claim more spots. Because set 3 Worlds, it was 2 out of 3. Set 4 Worlds, it was 4 out of 6. Set 5 was the exception, with none or 1 if you count hack.
Was it 4 on set?
Yeah, it was 4 out of 6.
Was it?
Yeah. It was Lyris, Zaiku, Badable, and Brank.
Oh, yeah, Brank.
I didn't know
Brank.
Brank
I was going to say, yeah. Okay, no, it's true.
So it was 4 out of 6.
No, but I agree. France has been the powerhouse. We talked about it earlier for obvious why the reasons are why they're so strong. It's not like you wake up one day, you're French, and you're oh shit, I'm just the god of TFT. It's obviously because of the scene and everything. But I think you will reach, like, I think even like because we're thinking like in the sense of like, okay, it's set 7. That sounds like so much, right? Like set 7 is like, oh shit, like we've been doing this for so long now. But like if you compare it to League, like the first couple of years was like really like, how should you say, like not grassroots obviously, because Riot kind of like spoon fed it, but like it had this like
I mean, pretty much grassroots. I played set 3 and there wasn't any kind of esports.
Yeah. So we're like still in the growing phase, and now it's starting to move in the right direction, like everywhere, like even in EU. And I think give it like a couple of more sets, and I can't obviously say for sure, but I don't think the gap between France and the rest will be as large, because then like eventually there's only so much you can do on your own, as well as like the French scene. Like they're gonna find a cap eventually, because like we spoke about earlier, like they're gonna have to expand either more to Europe in other ways, or to the American viewers, or whatever it is, like through English. Like there's gonna have to come a point where like the French ecosystem isn't enough anymore, and like if they want to expand, they have to go beyond that. And I think then you're just capping yourself as well there by going outside of Europe, if you were to like make them their own little like region or sub-region.
And their own region means there's a different regional event at the end of it, where there's none of the European fans are watching French players at all. There's it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. Also because like
on their perspective,
like also because there are different sub-regions, so to say, to Europe, right? Like there are like Turkey and Russia and stuff like that, but they still end up in the same regional tournament at the end, right? So like I don't see how you would realistically do that without like making the whole system really backwards, I guess.
I would say that, so I, generally speaking, agree with both Gunmay and Panda and disagree with the take. Mm-hmm. The one thing I do want to say, though, is that I think there should be a way to still celebrate the strength of a region at these large events. And I wonder if there is room for a competitive format to grow into. And it's tough because obviously you don't want to force a certain amount of representation from each country, because you do want the best players competing at regionals. But it would be really cool if all of the French players at regionals are not only playing for themselves, but they're also playing for some way to claim France as the best country in Europe. Like, and I wonder, is there some sort of point system where maybe any country that has 2 players or more at regionals is able to qualify for some other event that's on top of regionals, where maybe
we kind of had one, right? Like, or we didn't.
It was a Super Bowl.
Yeah, except the Super Bowl. I liked the qualifying process. No, it ended up being like,
no, that was double trouble in Madrid.
Yeah, but it ended up being.
But I think they were still learning with Super Bowl how to do exactly for set 7. I think set 6 was just a starting ground. But yeah, I mean, I don't think. It's hard to kind of reward a country for doing well. I think they're already rewarded.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. I think you like it would be in some sort of tournament fashion where you do like a tournament with the different countries. Like you'd have like I think a team tournament is the best way to do it. Like we did in set 3 with the EU Cup from
That was so
like,
sick.
That was so fun. That like I think like I still talk like to everyone I talk to that play that was still one of the most fun tournaments we've ever played.
And just TFT with teams is so much easier to watch than free for all, because it condenses the storylines into 2 people that you have to follow per game instead of 8. You know, as long as I know what team each player is on, it's so much easier to follow. I loved it, and I didn't care about any of the European players. I guess like Gunmay was probably the only European player I knew at the time for that set 3 event, and I loved watching it. It was super fun.
Yeah, it was super fun, and like the whole and I think we've also come a long way in like the team tournament space, but like in terms of like now we know what we want, but we haven't like made any progress in like actually executing on it. And I think there's a lot of space there for some sort of tournament there with like the regional pride like on the line there. I think that could make like some sense.
I'm not going to go too off topic with the kind of the takes still being discussed. I don't know if it's fine if I can, but I just wanted to mention that in Legend of Runeterra, we did kind of a Masters Europe tournament with like a team-based thing with countries, and I agree. I think it's a really, really good idea. And for one of the reasons that maybe we're not going to talk about as much or as evident is that it connects viewers to a team or to someone to root for very, very easily. When Runeterra first became a game, there weren't kind of these players going from Hearthstone or other games to Runeterra and then already big names. It was more of an endemic scene. And that tournament was so good at viewers would engage automatically with the country that they're rooting for, despite not knowing the players and who they are. And we had 3 different editions, and every edition became better and better. And it was really, really good, especially for Europe, because there is so much regional pride and national pride. It works really well. There's just so many easy narratives and storylines. And something like that, I would give France maybe 2 spots. In More Talk Madness, France had 2 teams.
Yeah.
Deserved.
Okay,
I think
fair.
those are the kind
I
of things
that.
where you can reward a country, but not excluding it from the whole circuit. I think that is just, like Gunmay said, a little bit backwards, I think, in terms of achieving something in like a big picture kind of way, and not just a very narrow-minded approach. In my
Fair
opinion.
point.
Yeah, you have any thoughts you want to respond with?
I agree to disagree to some things, because I still think that the depth of talent in France is actually comparable to some other servers, not China. I think it's comparable to things like NA. And I think that even... Okay, Gunmay said that we didn't talk enough shit in France, but I will say it. We talk shit, but just in French. So you don't get to hear it.
I mean,
That's the problem.
yeah, that's what I mean. Like, yeah, but the same with the
So
Spanish
have to
players
address
and the
this.
Germans and everyone. Like, we all talk shit.
Yeah,
but
of course.
we need to do it like publicly and do it like for the storyline. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, don't worry. So I will start translating this right now.
Perfect.
We think that France C team can beat Spain A team.
Maybe,
think-
but maybe at the end of set 7, that won't be the case. I think in set 7, a lot is going to change with countries being much more invested. And until now, France has had a lead just from the start they had with the content creators, with the scene in general, with the interest from just a massive fan base of players. Just it's a numbers game, really. And I think French players are very good. Nothing against them. But you're like, I don't think there's this idea of just being born good at TFT because you're from a country.
Not.
Because this isn't like football, for example. It isn't like
Yeah.
it's a very new thing. And something that has developed over 2-3 years. And the same way that it's developed in 2-3 years, in 1 year, it can change drastically.
Agreed.
So if I was French, I would enjoy it right now. And I would say that if Spain gets more invested, which I think they are with initiatives they're taking already for set 7. If other countries copy Spain in the same way, I think this dominance, this dynasty idea of France in Europe is going to end very soon. And it's maybe not a good thing for you, but for EU as a whole, it'll be a very good thing. And for me as a Spanish player, and Spanish caster also as well.
Man,
I will say I agree with, or not agree, but like I will say the depth of the French population is true, but not to the extent of like NA or something that's ridiculous, because the server is enormous, right, compared to like just French. But I will say I think that's also a byproduct of having the last couple of years as the only really like part of EU which has a scene. I think that's why. Like, I think that's a byproduct of that. I think the more, like Panda said, like the more other regions do the same thing, we're going to see a more depth, because there's going to be an influx of new players. Like, if you look, like when I was talking earlier about new players, a lot of them are French. Like, a lot of the French players that are at the top now, like maybe played back then in set 2, set 3, but they weren't like top tier, you know? Like, I remember in set 3, when people were talking about regionals even, like, I remember talking to Fluffy, and I said, I think double 61 is the dark horse of the tournament, because at that point, like, he wasn't streaming, he wasn't like the top guy, like he was at the top of ladder, everyone knew who he was, like in high elo, but he wasn't like known as, like, he wasn't a Dasic or a Salvi, you know?
Yeah, indeed.
So, but I remember telling Fluffy, I was like, this guy is the best player in EU for sure, like by far. And he was like, nah, man, I mean, maybe he's top 10 and like right now, but like he's not that good. Like, but I was like, no, I'm telling you, he's gonna stomp EU, and he did. Like, and then he stopped Worlds as well. So like,
And what do you think about him now?
I think he's still one of the best players. I think people are quick to judge because of one performance, but like, I think it's very telling if you can win 2 regionals, like even if it's like all sample size, whatever. I think it's very, like, I think him and Pass the Ball are probably the 2 best, not just French players, but EU players, like right now when they're in form. But I still think above both of them are Salvi when he's in top form. And I say that very confidently because I played against him so much, but obviously he's not at that form now. He kind of came
I agree
back
with double.
bit, but yeah.
Watching set 6 as a cast for all the main events, and obviously I was getting into it in set 6 in a way that I didn't know a lot of the players. I played in set 3. I knew Gunmay and some like Daisy and all the veteran names, but it was my first introduction. I obviously watched a lot of competitive because I was casting the events, and Double is a player that there is some inherent talent, and it's not just a numbers game with him. You can see him playing, and you can very quickly see over the course of a weekend that he has something special. I know that for Worlds, and I don't want to speak out of line, but I think there was some prep issues.
Some Valorant gameplay, maybe? Yeah, I was actually
not just double, but also I think
he played Fortnite.
Elden Ring, for example.
It's all good.
I don't want to bring it up as like an excuse, but EU going into Worlds, despite whatever everyone might think about EU just competing and only playing TFT all the time, a lot of players, I heard rumors that a lot of players did not play a lot of TFT, and I think the results were kind of evident in that regard. Double 61 at Worlds compared to double 61 in regionals was different from my perspective, very, very different. Yeah. I was kind of watching and casting him in both games to some extent, or in both tournaments, and you can tell it was much more rusty. Whereas regionals, it was almost prodigy level kind of thing with how he was playing and what he was playing and the comps he was playing. So it's never brought up in the discussion between NA and EU, but EU going to Worlds, a lot of players did not really prepare to the level they should have maybe.
I was gonna call anyone out, but since you did it, like I was like, I remember literally the night
Name
before
names,
Worlds.
baby.
Yeah, no, I'm doing.
I've only heard rumors, so I can't say for sure.
Like I don't care. Like it's like, but like I remember 6 a.m. or like 7 a.m. I was still logged in on my PC when I was gonna go to work, and I see double 61 and Jin playing Valorant the night before we're gonna play, like they're gonna play Worlds, and they log out like at the same time as I go to work, and I'm like, they for sure played all night, dude. There's no shot. Like they're fucked. I remember typing in the chat in like Discord, I was like, EU's fucking doomed. We have no shot. Or our best two players are playing Valorant until 6 a.m. Dude, we're so screwed.
Actually, I have even better informations because the week before Worlds, Double 61 was invited to a Fortnite Invitational with lots of French streamers, and he won it.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So he must have been pretty hot in terms of his form in Fortnite as well. So that's two different shooters he was.
And,
I'm not giving them shit. Everyone's down to do like what they want, but yeah.
I think that's all the time we have for this call, Pikachu. Is there
okay.
anything else you want to say before we go?
No, I had some more text, but I had some answers, but I would just keep them for another time.
All right, yeah. Hold them in your pocket. We'll get you on another time.
Thank you.
All right. Catch you later.
Thank you. See you.
Man, can I just say, whenever I hear those kinds of conversations about regional pride in Europe, it actually just makes me wish I was European. Like nobody wants to watch a 4v4 tournament of New Jersey versus Idaho. It's just not interesting in the slightest, and I wish I could be a part of something like that. I would love to have, like, I don't know. I want to trash talk. Like I want to try and get on a national team. Like I love that EU has these rungs of the ladder that you can actually try and to climb up besides just trying to hit rank 1. That's actually a really, really cool thing that EU has that I don't know if NA would ever be able to have that.
Maybe if we get
I think it's more of a it's like a traditional thing. I think it comes from EU growing up with sports as well, all different rivals. Like Spain versus France is a thing, not because it's a thing in TFT, not because these TFT players hate each other. It's often maybe the complete opposite, to be honest. But because you grow up in Spain watching football, and whenever there's a Spain versus France, they're neighboring countries, they hate each other. There's going to be some rivalry in basketball, the same in pretty much any sport. So there's these kind of, if you're into sports to any degree and you play TFT, then you're going to have all these national prides, and you know exactly what countries kind of hate each other because of different sports. And that's something that is just inherent. You don't have to think about it. Whereas in NA, you would have to kind of create that from scratch, and it's a much harder thing to do.
I mean, in NA, our flagship sport is a game that only we play, and we can only be the world champion. So that's NA in a nutshell for you. So I'm going to bring in our next caller. We've got Jake here. JW Lindell. Is that how do you actually say your tag, Jake?
To be honest, I don't even know. It's just my initials and my last name, I guess. But go with Jake.
We got Jake from Legends TFT. Jake, where are you calling from? What do you want to talk about?
I'm calling from Oregon over here on the west coast of the US, and I wanted to talk about something. It's more of a statement maybe than a question, but I wanted to see what your guys' thoughts were of this. So something I heard you guys talk about at the beginning of the show, something we talk about kind of a lot as a TFT community is like, how can we make tournaments bigger? How can we get more people involved, and how can we grow interest? And the more I've talked to the people and the more I've thought about it, I actually kind of maybe went to the opposite side of that. And I thought, like, how can we really focus in on certain individuals and create maybe more of like a franchise league with less people? Doesn't mean there's less opportunity. It doesn't mean there's less large tournaments or whatever. But I do think the establishment of like a TFT competitive league with weekly game nights, sort of like how the LCS does with League, right? Let's think 16 players, 32 players, like max, would actually help the scene more than anything. And I'll give you my two reasons, then I'm interested to hear kind of what you guys think. But my two reasons are, one, creating like these franchise spots that are at least, let's say, safe to some degree within a set, allows for orgs to have more involvement with those players. It allows for sponsors to have more involvement with those players. It also creates better storylines, in my opinion, right? Like, if we look at it from our side, we're dumping a lot of resources as a community, as Riot, right, as the broadcast, into players that might not show up in the next tournament, that might low roll or whatever. And when you have 16 players playing weekly, you can really create storylines, rivalries, trash talk, and all of that. So I know that was a lot. I guess the statement is that harder to get into, a more limited league, I actually think is the most optimal competitive format.
Okay, I have an immediate thought on this. I want to ask real quick, though, either Gunmay or Panda, are either of you familiar with the Italian league's competitive format?
A little, yeah.
In TFT, yeah. So they...
Not fully.
And someone in chat, I'm sure, if Shining Star was here earlier, I don't know if he's still here, but the Italian league basically has 3 divisions. They have the Open Division, the Blooming Talents, and then their Super League. And each one, it's the Super League 16 players, Blooming Talents is 16, and then Open Division is more grassroots widespread to lower ranked players to enter. The cool thing about it, though, is it's actually very similar to what Jake is describing here, where they have, I think it's 6 different game days across their season, which could definitely be a higher volume than what they're actually doing. But the great thing about the format is that even though I'm not super connected to the Italian league, whenever I watch European TFT, it typically is the Super League. And I could tell you, even just being on the outskirts of it, I can name a lot of the best Italian TFT players. Like when I think of the Italian league, I can tell you about Shining Star, Balotelli, Luque, Ace of Spades, Sweller Tiger, Matt with a bunch of numbers at the end. Like there's a bunch of these players that even though I'm not super connected to the scene, I've seen them playing across multiple different sets, across multiple different splits, and it's much easier for me to feel a connection to those players because I see them time and time again. Gunmay, what were you going? It sounded like you had something to say right off the bat.
Oh, I literally put the clock on me for this, dude. Otherwise, I'm gonna rant forever. So be ready here.
Okay.
We have been talking about the way to make competitive good for the player, right? And the only way we all came together, it was the league format basically, where you play over multiple patches, over multiple games, over multiple days, and essentially just add up the points at the end. Because what TFT lacks is volume. We don't have enough tournaments. We don't have enough games to actually determine or give enough people chances to actually do well. Because and that's why you have these scenarios where people will say, oh, he low rolled, he high rolled, blah, blah, blah. It's very rare that you will see someone actually get credit for winning, which is crazy.
Yes.
But it's and that kind of takes away from it, both as a player, as a viewer, as a community, everything. I think the very only exception is double winning worlds and regionals in set 3. I think that's the only exception where everyone's agreeing okay, he's just better. He's actually just better. Mm-hmm. Anytime else, they're being oh, look at how he high rolled game 5, or there's always some excuses and stuff. And so everyone I know at least would like some sort of league format over the course of, but then again we end up getting this situation where it's 16 players or 24 or how many players there are, and that's it. That's the scene, which is good for maybe the scene in the sense of or not scene, but the narrative standpoint and building the story points and all this stuff. I think that becomes better. But I think as for the scene as a whole, I think if that's the only thing that exists, it's really bad, because then you end up in the same situation again, basically, where we have nothing to play for most of the set.
Yeah.
So it has to be a thing outside of everything else we have, which would be a great addition. I think that would reward. I personally hate ladder play outside of snapshots. I really despise. I don't think it's fun. I use it as practice, but it would give you an incentive. It was okay, the top 16 of ladder will be invited to this season of TFT League, whatever. That would give you an insane incentive to actually try hard on ladder even more. Like you want to be consistent on ladder. You want to make sure you're good on every patch. You're playing all the time. Because personally, like my favorite, and I'm not biased here because like I won one of them, but like the Giant Slayer series that we had back in set 3, like the first one and the second one, we had it over multiple weeks, over multiple patches. Even the set, like we swapped set at the end of like before the finals for set for
3.5.
Giant Slayer series, to 3.5. And like that really showed like who was good at adapting, like who was willing to bring out new comps, who was willing to do like stuff. Like it would even like a lot of the game days would happen like 2 days before after the patch as well. Like so there's a lot of like, I think that stuff is really interesting for players to see, or like for viewers to see. And I think the league format would do a really good job of that, because then like that would be one of the main points. Because right now, like a lot of players would like hate if like, for example, we play a patch or like we play a big tournament and the patch just happened. Like every player would be so up in arms about that. It would be like, why the hell are you changing the game just before we play in the biggest tournament or whatever? But I think having that as a main point of like, oh, who is the most creative? I think Mortog has talked about this a lot as well, where he's like, I wish we had some sort of format where this was like brought up more, like where this was like rewarded to like be really good at coming up with new stuff on the fly or whatever. And I think the league format would be really good to do that. So for that, it would be really good.
I know you had some thoughts, and I'm going to call a clock on Gunmay because I know he can keep going.
Yeah, I can.
I like the idea a lot from an entertainment perspective. I think it's a really good idea, especially it fits very well with NA scene because it already has this very established top end we were talking about from a player perspective, but also from an entertainment perspective, from the personality perspective. But it's not, I don't think it's, I mean, from a viewer perspective, it's great. Imagine if you can just watch these top 16 players that are very good at the game, that are also very entertaining, that are all kind of friends with each other to some extent, and have them interact over a multi-week period would be very good. But Riot's never going to accept that because Riot wants to have a very inclusive system for TFT, a very open system, I think, to some extent. I think it would have to be something like Gunmay saying, something external. Italian Super League, I think that format works really well if everyone involved is very passionate about what is being done. I imagine there's not very many prize pool incentives in the Italian league. Sure. I imagine a lot of it comes from pride, comes from, the drive to compete and to be better and have this drive to go up in the rankings. And I'm not sure that part of it fits with NA scene. I'm not sure if all the top streamers are going to want to. That's the problem. So I don't think this package, this viewer package, will work for EU scene because there's too many players to narrow it down to 16, 24. From an economic perspective, like franchising, all this works for LoL because there's just such a big viewer base. There's such a big, so much to work with, so much money to work with. You can put that much more effort into something like that. It makes sense. But for TFT, it's way too small, even in NA, from a viewer perspective, to have something like that work. Unfortunately, I think from an entertainment perspective, yes, that would be fantastic. It's the reason why the NBA and all the top sports leagues in the world do this system. It's not by accident. This is fundamentally just the best way to engage fans and viewers in the same exact game that's being played over decades with the same teams to some extent. It's a very, solved system, but I don't think it would work with TFT. Unfortunately, I wish it would. Simply because in NA scene, which is the one that would fit the most for this, I don't think there's ever going to be enough external investment, at least not in the next set or next 2 sets, for that to happen and for streamers to be invested in playing every weekend or every, and being consistent with it and all this stuff. It's a little bit too much to ask from the scene right now. I wish it was, though, because it would be hilarious and really.
Yeah, I think money. I think money is really just going to be the biggest issue. Jake, do you have any thoughts on that actually?
Yeah, actually, I agree and I disagree on a couple points there, and I just kind of want to throw it out there to hear your thoughts on it too. But the part that I come back to is TFT is a personality-based game and esport, right? No matter how much the main broadcast dumps into it as far as resources, people, money, I think the personalities will always outperform it. And that's not a bad thing. There's plenty of other games that are like that. And I think TFT should look at those games, like Apex Legends, for example, is a really good one. A very growing esport right now that no matter what that main broadcast does, it will never outpace its top people, right? Imperial Hal, I'll throw him out as an example, on TSM will always get 60, 70, even 100,000 views playing in an Apex Legends tournament. Apex has doubled down on building up those personalities, and the views and community that those personalities build are directly representative of the esport. I think in TFT, sometimes we look at the main broadcast as the only part of the esport, if that makes sense, and not the individuals. I think this weekly league format might allow for streamers to grow further, if that makes sense, right? It would allow content for Soju, for Goobums, whoever in NA, and the scene would grow that way. It might not grow the main broadcast, and I understand that obviously has its plays into resources and funding and everything, but I do think there's ways to bring the personalities in that would drive revenue.
I mean, you can go first if you want, Panda, but I do think.
But I mean, you can do this outside of the main circuit, no? I mean, an example, and a very small example, obviously, Mortal Kombat Madness, I think, worked fantastically on so many levels, from a comms perspective, with like the players and being able to hear their thoughts, the team perspective, et cetera, et cetera. This can be expanded upon, not in the way where it takes over the main competitive circuit, because what you're saying essentially is for every single TFT player in North America, except for the top 16, to forget about playing TFT and to have no incentive to play ladder or anything else, essentially.
Yeah. So I guess to clarify there, right, I think there's other esports that do this well, right? So Apex Legends, I'm going to go back to this just because I think it is another personality-based, has a full challenger circuit with very, very low barriers. I think you have to be like golden ranked, right, which is maybe the equivalent of like diamond in TFT, with very low barriers to build up through these tournaments, and through relegation, let's just say, in a half set, you have your 16 play. Let's say 8 of those get relegated. You have multiple tournaments throughout the year to bring 8 new people in. That allows for underdog narratives against the existing 8. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm just kind of throwing it out there, giving a little hot take, I guess.
No, yeah, I think a relegation system would have to be in place if we were to do a weekly league. We would. The problem then is, how do we supplement these players who are coming in halfway through the set, that are working their way up from open bracket into challenger series into whatever this top tier league is, and then still put them on an even playing field with these players who are being punished, so to speak, for being in this highest league the entire time. They didn't have to just kind of high roll a couple patches or have a couple patches where they felt really good on. They were actually required to be at the top of their game the entire set in order to stay there. There's just a lot of issues that come about. I also think, just talking about the entertainment perspective, I talked about this in another episode as well, so obviously I'll keep it quick, but I don't want to watch a 15-hour broadcast every couple weeks. I actually just don't. It takes so much time to sit through a weekend of TFT tournaments. And there's a lot of people, I'm sure, that actually just can't justify sitting through an entire weekend's broadcast. If we had a weekly league where all of a sudden I can dedicate 4 hours a week over the course of 2 days or something like that to watching my favorite players, suddenly I am way more incentivized to invest into this scene, because I can now justify spending my time there instead of having to dedicate an entire weekend where, if I can't watch a tournament, which is what happened to me for Innovation Cup, I had just had a baby. Innovation Cup happened. I didn't watch any of it. I had no idea what was going on in the scene. I actually just couldn't keep up. So I think the weekly season makes it infinitely easier for casual competitive spectators to enter into the scene and really draw or really build connections between our top players in our region.
Agreed. Yeah.
I have maybe a hot take on the part about like the streaming and everything. I think it's both a blessing and a curse for the scene and for like the competitive scene. Like, I think it's very good for like the actual scene, like the players themselves, obviously, because a lot of them are being able to sustain themselves on it when the competitive scene hasn't been able to like make them do that. But I think it's hindering the like actual investment out of like more third parties and everything of getting into the scene, because it's very easy to say, hey, look at this broadcast we did, it had X amount of viewers, instead of comparing it to, hey, look at this category that was on Twitch, how many viewers it had while we're streaming this.
Yeah.
That it's like, I remember we talked about this with Lobby 2 with Mortog one time. It's like, it's very different to like show investors or partners or whatever to like get into this like pseudo thing with the numbers. Like it's very complicated to like bring it out like black or white and say, hey, this is how many people watch the tournament, when it's split out over like 24 POVs, right? Like, I think it is very interesting for the player. Like for me, for example, I like the main broadcast, like to always have it up. I always go back and forth because we don't have the control of like doing it ourselves as high level players, especially to like look at the POVs. And like if I see that Soju is in a really interesting spot, I'm gonna go to his POV and see what he's doing, because to me as a high level player, like that matters to me. Like that's what I'm interested in. But I think for the majority of the viewers, the main broadcast should be what the people are watching. Like otherwise, something's not right, I feel like. And I think it's fine to say like, oh, they're watching the stream because it's entertaining and stuff. But then we're kind of going off from the whole competitive. Then like the whole tournament doesn't matter, like it's like they would have showed you play ladder anyways or whatever else, like so like in terms of like just looking at the actual competitive interest there, I think it's a lot better for the scene if the main broadcast is the actual main broadcast. And I think League did this where they got a lot of shit for it. I remember back in the day when they first did this, but like they basically made it so like they've like made the league really quick. They made sure that people don't stream the game or whatever. Like they made sure that the players are there to play and the broadcast is the broadcast. If you want to go watch LCS, you're going to the LCS channel and that's where it is. And then obviously they're split it up for like since then, like for other countries and other languages and stuff like that. But like it's still the same idea, right?
And I think, oh yeah, go finish up. Yeah. No,
I was just gonna say that I think that is in the interest of like competitive scene to going forward, because I think that one of the biggest points of like why we haven't had third-party involvement is because of the viewer numbers as well. I think I have to imagine like that does scare away people that are interested in getting into the scene a bit, at least.
I don't agree so much. I think, and this is something as a caster on the main broadcast channel, you would, think that, I would care about it. But I don't think so. I think TFT, like you guys mentioned, is a game that has a lot of personalities, and the way to watch it is not like other esports. This is something that Riot, I think, is acknowledging and understanding, and they're shouting out co-streamers on the main broadcast and not caring about the broadcast viewers, because this is not what, there's going to be big streamers, and when you can watch their perspective and fans are coming to watch that player, they can't guarantee they're going to watch that player all the time on the main broadcast. I think there are ways to make the main broadcast better. I think there are ways to feature players, to feature streams, you can do stuff in the future. But I don't think it's a bad thing to have players with more numbers in terms of viewer numbers for tournaments.
Do you think there's been growing pains because of it though? Because it's like this new way of doing it, like, because as far as I remember in Hearthstone, we had like this thing where like it actually was like a lot of personalities and stuff as well, but the tournaments were still tournaments, like we did like, but I think that's also a byproduct of us having COVID right when the scene started, and we haven't had LANs, so like everyone just has to like, and also like the lack of spectator and all that nonsense, right? Like we're still like kind of having issues with that, like that's not even perfect yet.
I also just want to point out it's also limiting in the different ways that you can bring third parties on to invest. For instance, we can't have ad reads that the stream, like Soju's not going to do an ad read for State Farm in the middle of his tournament run. We can't have sponsored segments.
Can you imagine? Holy shit, I would watch that though. I would actually watch that, dude. I saw him do a NordVPN sponsorship, and that was the worst shit I've seen in my life, dude.
I think that I say we as a community. I actually do think that the pressure is a bit more on whoever is really in charge of trying to make competitive TFT grow. But there needs to be some sort of creativity in how can we bring value to third-party sponsors and investors while also recognizing the strength of our community, which really is in our personalities. And I have absolutely no idea what the answer is. And I don't even know where to look, like who to ask, because it's such a new and unique thing in esports that I don't know that there really is a clear roadmap for what that needs to look like. But I think it's a very easy problem to recognize. It's just diagnosing it with a cure seems to be very difficult.
Yep. And going back, if I can just quickly mention the franchising, the first initial hot take that we stemmed off of. I do think it's a very good idea. I mentioned it before, but I think the problem is TFT doesn't have the numbers to support the investment, the monetary investment, the time investment, everything there is. You need, and comparing to Apex, I think is a bit a bad comparison, because the numbers for Apex and what Apex is as a game compared to TFT is drastically different. I think a better comparison would be Hearthstone. They have a Grandmasters League system. Gunmay, I don't know if you know more about that than me, but I don't think it's going very well in terms of Hearthstone as an esport.
It's doing awful
because it's I've been a caster in card games and in strategy games for the past 5 years, and it's a niche thing in esports. This is not the big leagues. This is not a tier 1 esport. Unfortunately, I wish every event that I've worked had 100,000 viewers, but it's not the case. And when you have that kind of viewership, you have to change your outlook on what you can do and how ambitious you can be with certain projects. And I think a league like that, I think NA is somewhat close, but from an investment perspective, especially an outsider perspective, because Riot's not going to be the one to handle that, I think, with their outlook on esports as a whole. Yeah. I think it's not going to work, unfortunately. I think it's a good idea, but it doesn't quite fit TFT's current ecosystem in terms of numbers, in terms of viewership, in terms of where it is in esport. I think it's still very young.
Jake, you have any follow-up thoughts?
No, I mean, I kind of pretty much agree with that. I brought it up as, like I said, a little bit of a hot take. It kind of like playing devil's advocate. It even challenges, what I think is possible, but I just kind of like to throw it out there and get the community's response and appreciate your response. And final, I'll just say, Panda, what you guys are doing over in EMEA is amazing. I was a pretty much only NA TFT viewer, and then I would say this set, I got really addicted to watching the EMEA broadcast because of what you guys and your team do. The main broadcast is exceptional over there, so shout out to you guys.
Thank you so much. It's gonna get infinitely better for set 7. I can promise that. Set 6 was just like the base, the foundation of it. So set 7 will be much better.
Hyped.
Jake,
thanks, you guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming out. Anything you want to shout out before you go?
No, shout out Gangly. He's the most consistent, most creative content creator in all of TFT. I'll say that. What you do for the scene is awesome. I appreciate you doing shows like this. It's a lot of work. Chat, it's a lot of work putting stuff like this on, getting the videos, the TikToks, the YouTube shorts. So shout out to Gangly.
Thank you, Jake. I appreciate that. All right, we'll catch you later.
Later, guys.
All right. Looks like we don't have too many more calls. There's actually so much more to talk about, though. I mean, unless you guys really have to go, I mean, I'm down to just keep chatting.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, one of the things we actually didn't even talk about is set 7, which is
true.
We literally didn't talk about set 7 at all.
We went straight to hot takes.
We really did, yeah. I mean, we kind of recapped set 6, talked about EU, and then really didn't get to talk too much about set 7. But Gunmay, I know you've actually played a lot.
Yeah.
You've been playing. Actually, you didn't really play set 1, but I know you've played pretty consistently since set 2.
Yeah.
First thoughts on set 7, how it compares to the rest of the sets?
I want to say like I'm happy with it. Like obviously now there's been like 3 days of Volibear just running around killing everyone, but like in terms of but I don't care about balance when it's like PvE, right? I think overall it's good. I'm a little bit worried that there's like a little bit of like, oh, we're trying to do like a million things at the same time and it's kind of overlapping, and some silly scenarios happen where you're like, wow, I'm not allowed to play the game, or wow, I didn't have to do a single move this game. Like I feel like the highs and the lows are getting really like there's a big difference, right? And I think that happens from it having like, you have the dragons, you have the like the new, like a lot of item influx, you have like all this stuff, like you have this but I like a lot of the changes they did. Like for example, they made so you can at least reroll 1 set of augments for 1 gold. And then when you have this dragon statue thing where it gives you like a lot of gold and items and stuff, you can reroll that for 1 gold every time, which I think is completely broken. I have no clue why it's 1 gold. I could rant for like 100 hours about that. Like it makes no sense because it's like the first time we can ever actually use gold as a resource for items, which is crazy. Like that's huge. But I think like a lot of the changes they're doing to like those things, like they're taking the things that they had before and improving on them and making it more competitive friendly, which I really like. Like I have no complaints about that. I just feel like there's a lot of things in the game where it can be a little like the learning curve is probably steeper if you're new to the game, which I think is good or bad. I don't know. I think it's maybe more bad, but
yeah, I feel like TFT is already kind of hard to understand at first.
Yeah. So I think that might be negative, but for me as someone that's, like you said, has played since set 2 and like been challenger ever said, like for me it's kind of fun to play around with all these it's like a lot of new toys, But I will say like the biggest gripe I have is the dragons make like the incentive of the dragons is that you're supposed to like play them for late game and they're like supposed to be your end game, so to say. So if you play a comp that doesn't have dragons, you're kind of like capping yourself, but not only that, you're like finding yourself in spots where I'm like going fast 8 and I'm like looking for a Corki and a Sona, but I just can't find them because I'm getting 6 dragons every shop. Like I just can't. And like I wish I had like some system where like if you get a dragon, you see less dragons or something, or like, like because you can't, because of some augments and stuff, you can't just remove it. I think that would also be too broken where you would like find dragons too easy and stuff. But I wish there was something that made it so like the dragons don't invade the shop so much. I almost wish you'd have a 6 slot for the dragon at this point, like anything that just makes it so it doesn't grief my shop. because it's also PBE, so like a lot of people are bad at capping their boards. I've seen a lot more dragon boards do well like the last couple of days than the first couple of days, because the first couple of days was just reroll, but that almost always happens because it's a lot easier to just jam in golden units than to actually have to think and use your brain at level 8 and 9 and like actually have to cap out your board. But I think because of the augments and the units and stuff, I do think rerolling is a lot more incentivized. And I think, but Mortog also said this, he posted it on Reddit as well, but like he wants 3-cost to be more prominent in the late game comp, which I understand why he wants that, but I don't like the direction of like moving away from like these super cap boards, because I think that's where like the cool moments happen in TFT. I think that's where the fun happens. And I think that's where you like get to show off like a lot of your skill as well. I think in making like the cap boards, I think that's one of the, for example, NA strengths. I think one of the strengths of NA as a region is that they're super, super good at capping their board. Like they will play super greedy. They will be like, I have 1 life, but I don't need more. But I'm gonna hit everything here on 9 and just send it, And if I go 8th, I go 8th. And like those moments are cool. Like those moments are fun. And I think we've been slowly moving away from those moments since they made 9 harder to get. They made it more expensive. They lower legendary chances. They do these things that like make the end game a lot harder to obtain, which I think isn't personally something I like, but I can see why it would be better for the game as a whole for lower level players, because they probably don't see those late games very often anyway, so it doesn't really impact them, but they care more about being able to hit Yone 3, slow rolling on 6, like they care more about that. So I can see why they're doing it. I just personally don't like it much. But I will say, I think as someone that cares more about competitive than the actual game, like for example, like I'm gonna play hundreds of games right during the season or like the set. So at a certain point, I don't care if it's set 6, set 4, set 3, like it's all the same at that point. Like I've played it so much. I care more about the competitive side of things, and I think for that, a lot of the changes that are being made are really good. I think that. So I have positive outlook on the actual game itself.
Ken, is there anything you wanted to say about Set 7? I actually haven't played any PBE yet, so I don't have like too many immediate thoughts, but I know you've played a bit, Panda. Any immediate thoughts?
I think it's hard to say from like balance stuff and like what units are good or what comps are. I think there's no point kind of going into that yet because things are going to change so drastically. I do think, like Gunmay said, there's a lot of like creative possibilities that are maybe a bit too creative in terms of emblem, in terms of like certain things you can do now that you couldn't do before, that maybe they have to make sure they can like control all these possibilities, which is going to be a difficult thing to do when you're adding so many variables. I do think the big picture stuff in terms of augments, in terms of re-rolling augments, is a great idea in terms of adding variance to the game, but then also having some control over the variance where you can make these informed decisions about when to take that control, when to reroll, when to do certain things, and you can take advantage of that if you have more information, if you have more knowledge. So all this, not just that it's a good thing for Set 7, but it's a good thing that the devs are addressing and having this outlook. I think that's a good sign. But I do think, Set 7 has a lot of moving pieces, maybe too many. We'll find out in live. I think it's too early to say. I do think what Gunmay is saying, where if Mortog wants to focus on like having vertical comps, having like 3-star rerolls, and for them to be good is a good thing. But I think the peak of TFT in Set 6, for example, 6.5, was when you were able to build like these frontline, backline comps that were just not a cookie cutter comp that you see on the Reddit guide, exactly, but more just top players being able to get to level 8, roll down, and say, hey, I can look at my lobby, I can look at my board, I can look at my items, and I can build this comp. That's not going to be just a vertical comp. It's not going to be just because when you're rolling for 3-star, you already have. Or when I was rolling for Talon last set and getting Challenger, I had this same one comp, and I'm gonna say right now, I'm not a Challenger level TFT player. I said it when I made it. I was the fakest Challenger in the history of EU West TFT.
Oh, don't say that, dude. There's been way more. Trust me.
No. I'm pretty close then, because I knew exactly what to abuse and how to abuse it and how to get good at one thing and just one trick Talon. But that didn't make me good, and that didn't make me. I don't think that highlights the real high level TFT, which is what makes, I think, competitive tournament so good. So there has to be that space where you can make a game where top players or players that are competitive can have these easy outs in terms of grinding this one comp or grinding this 3-star reroll comp or grinding this, certain play style, and you can one trick it and still do good, but have it be where there's enough control and enough, skill kind of openings, let's say, in the late game, where top player, like I'm talking top 10 in a region or top 20 in a region, challenger, a very high level challenger, can make certain boards and be able to have like a skill set that allows them to go one up above everyone else. And that's something that they have to have enabled for set 7, and something that has to be possible. If the highest level of TFT is 3-star rerolls, that's going to be a bad thing for the
it's been the worst part of it. Like every patch always has, like the most toxic patches of TFT has always been whenever you can just go level 5, go level 6, and just not make a change on your board the entire time and just roll. I hate that. Like that's why like when people say like, oh, why if you reroll this, or if you play the same fast level 8 comp, why is that different? It's because the way you get there is different every game. So it actually makes you have to like figure out, okay, how do I play the early game this game? How do I do this? And like the idea, I believe, don't quote me on it, but I think the augments are supposed to offset your your ability to actually be able to force the same comp every game, right? It's supposed to give you so many different options that you're like, okay, well, I can't play Talon reroll this game because it just gave me like blue battery and like all this other stuff that I can't use as augments.
You'd be surprised the augments landed with Talon reroll.
That's what I mean. Like that's supposed to happen, right? But I don't feel like at the current stage of the game, from like many games that I've played on the PBE right now, that's the case. It's like we'll see what happens on live, but like right now, I feel like it's very easy to still force stuff, which I don't personally like. But I think there is like a spot for rerolling and all this stuff in the game. I think it has to happen. Otherwise, we wouldn't even have 3 stars to begin with. But I think they should be like it used to be, like where you have like, oh, in set 2 it was like, oh, I have 6 Cogmos but Krugs. Maybe I just get 3 star and play reroll Predators, you know? It wasn't like, oh, I'm going into the game, me mech, which started in set 3, by the way. I still blame NA for that shit. Like I believe like that started this like snowball effect of what we have today, where it's like, oh, me this, me that, and it's like you just force it. Like that didn't used to happen until mech. So
I mean, Gunmay, you did just you one-tricked Berserkers in set 2, like 90% of your games.
I started my game calling someone handsome in the beginning of the game. Everyone thought I was doubles in set 2 until I showed my name. So
my strat was to stay quiet. I think it's always a bad idea to say anything in chat and have people kind of target you. I was always like, I would force stuff, but I would not say a single word in chat and just try and keep a low profile and hope no one noticed, with like cat reroll in set 6 and Talon as well. But Talon reroll, for example, is a comp that I think was very good at top 4ing, but it wouldn't win lobbies, and that's where it has to be. That's where these comps have to be. If you're very specialized on a comp, and I can say I'm a fake challenger player, but I was very good on Talon reroll, I think. Yeah. And I could catch players that were not scouting, and I was scouting every single round to make sure I would be able to top 4 every single game, and I did to some extent because I was able to be very good at one thing. But I would never get many first, and I think that's where the reroll comes to be. And you can top 4 with them,
I want to make it a clear point that there's plenty of skill expression in one tricking still. There very much is. It's a different type of game. That's just the reality. Like you're not, if you're a one trick reroller, you actually are just playing a different game than someone who likes to play flex boards on level 8. For sure. But there's still very much a level of skill expression, and like you're both saying, I think the happy medium between them, actually probably leaning significantly more towards flex play being strong, is kind of that sweet spot where reroll should be viable when the proper setup is there. And even so, I would say the people who are hard forcing just being a one-trick reroller, they should be punished for choosing to one-trick in non-optimal spots. And off the bat, they should be capped at a 3rd or 4th or lower, because the reality is you are opting into that risk of knowing that unless the stars align, I am playing from a suboptimal position and playing at a disadvantage from the get-go. And that's not bad for the game. I think that's actually great for the game. It's just hopefully set 7 is kind of that medium where you can be both a reroller and flex player, and depending on where you're choosing to opt into these, you're met with different results.
I have one more thing. I'm gonna flame whoever made the dragons here. So it's probably not Mortog. It's probably some design guy. I'm sorry in advance, but I'm gonna flame the shit out of you here. Okay, I don't know whose idea it was to make Ao Shin and Aurelion Sol literally look the same and be the same cost and everything. Like, it stresses me out when I roll, and I'm like, oh, I Nico'd the wrong dragon for the 4th game in a row. Like, it's literally like pissing me off that we have.
Might be a you problem, Gunmay.
We have green Galio, we have blue Galio, we have red Shyvana, we have black Shyvana, we have golden Shyvana, and then we have blue and more blue Aurelion Soul, dude. And like, what the fuck? Give it a different
We got to go
color.
back to, remember in set 3 when set 3 first
Make it
launched,
yellow.
and they put the models in the shop instead of the splash art. Do you remember that?
Oh,
It looked
I
it
actually
looked
remember that.
so
Oh,
bad.
that's when I was playing.
It was
I was really-
horrible.
Literally,
Yeah,
I swear to you, half
I
of the top,
remember.
like half of the top players were ready to quit. Like, that's literally, like, I swear that was why they changed it back. Like, Lobby 2, I've never seen Lobby 2 so fucking mad about a change in the game's entire life as that one, like with the pictures there.
models,
Like,
yeah.
everyone hated it. There was not a single one who liked that shit. We were so
It
mad.
was insane.
Like,
I think the dragon discussion is just, it's a resource thing, and obviously, I
yeah.
think-
I'm
I mean, it's
like half
crazy how-
memeing. I'm like half memeing because like I've
Crazy
seen
how
other
fast,
people do
like-
the same thing with the blue and the more blue like Aurelion Soul. I wish they just made it some type of different other color. It would be nice.
And also just like the lore, there aren't these many dragons in League of Legends. They had to just pull from you know the scrap stuff and all this to be able to make this a thematic. And honestly, to me, it's extremely impressive how they're able to churn out new sets and new themes and new traits and new everything at this speed, especially, and with like the team that I imagine has with TFT right now. So, I mean, I understand the frustration with that, especially at the beginning of a set when you're learning still. Like, the muscle
it's gotten
memory
better
of
now.
shots.
But I remember
It's
the
gonna be
first days.
difficult.
Holy shit! The first day was
Now
so
set
bad.
5 also had issues with like green, a lot of green in the shop, I've heard, and set 6 to some extent as well with Chemtech and everything. And some people complained about that, but with the Dragon stuff, I think it's just more specific that there just aren't
I
resources.
think the
and-
colors in general are better this time, though. To be honest,
Yeah.
like the shimmer scale, the rage wing, all of this stuff, like they're kind of color coded this time in a way where it's actually kind of noticeable, which I like. So I think
And there might still be a lot of red, but I mean, it's dragons, It's expected.
yeah,
It's the same way the Chemtech is going to be green, and it's the theme of the whole set.
All right. Well, we didn't even get a chance to talk about PvE Clash. Unfortunately, we actually had plenty of stuff to talk about. I was concerned. This is for chat here. I was actually concerned that we weren't going to have as many colors because I don't have as much of a EU fan base compared to NA. So I was a little nervous that we'd run out of things to talk about. And lucky for me, I got 2 big talkers on the show. We had no shortage of things to say. So, Gunmay, Panda, thank you both for coming on. I had a great time. This was a great discussion.
Yeah, me too.
Even though we only had 2 callers, both Jake and Pikachu, thank you both for coming on and chatting with us. Great takes, a lot of really fun discussion. Gunmay, we'll start with you. Is there anything you want to shout out before we go? Let us know where we can find you. Shout out your stream and all that stuff too.
Well, my stream is just Gunmay, and my Twitter is Gunnar Majol, like my name. So can't get Gunmay because some bot has it. I've been trying to get it for like over a year. I still can't get it, but you know what? It's okay.
Even in the shout-outs, you're flaming someone.
Yeah. No, but like outside of that, like shout out to the Spanish community because I've been like hanging out with them a lot more, getting more involved in the scene, and hopefully gonna move more in that direction going forward because I think what they're doing right now is really good. I'm really like happy to get to know like Manute and Snooty and everyone that's working on TFT and like for Spain. And I think there's gonna be good things to come for Spain in set 7 for sure. So be on the lookout.
All right, very nice. Yeah, Panda, anything you want to shout out?
I don't really stream or do YouTube, so not really in that regard. My Twitter is just Impetuous Panda. And do keep an eye on Set 7, EMEA, the broadcast team, GG Tech and Riot. We're going to prepare a lot more stuff, hopefully on platforms like YouTube and Twitter, more like specific stuff to the EMEA broadcast and the circuit and everything. So just keep eyes open. There will be stuff coming in the next few weeks. And yeah, Set 7, I think, will be, as I mentioned before, Set 6 was like a foundation for the whole circuit. And Set 7 will be so much more in terms of details and extra stuff happening and content and all this. And hopefully I'll be kind of spearheading a lot of the initiatives with content. So maybe on my YouTube channel, which is also Impetuous Panda, but hopefully not, but maybe. In the future.
All right, looking forward to seeing what you guys whip up. But with that is the end of High Rol Radio episode number 5. Thank you to everyone who's watching this live. If you want to support the show, make sure you follow us on Twitter at High Rol Radio. You can subscribe on anywhere you find your podcast. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel, Gangly TFT. Any subscriptions or support really does go a long way in helping me support the show. So thank you all for watching. We'll catch you in 2 weeks. Probably talking a bit more about the competitive format of Set 7 once that's all announced. We'll have to see who the very special guests are. But again, thank you everyone for coming out and watching the show live. Be good, and I'll catch you next time.